It's time to circle back to our top story. That's on the impeached South Korean President Yoon's lawyers saying that he will not be turning up for a second day of questioning due to health reasons. Investigators say that he had exercised his right to remain silent during an earlier 10-hour interrogation at the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. The leader's 48-hour arrest period's since been suspended, pending a court review over the legality of his detention. Mr. Yoon is also unlikely to attend the second hearing of his impeachment trial this afternoon. His request to move the hearing was rejected by the Constitutional Court. And for more on this, we are joined by Richey, who is Associate Professor of International Politics from the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Dr. Richey, President Yoon spent the night at the detention center after 10 hours of questioning at the CIO office, and now he cites his health for postponement of more questioning. What do you read into his latest move?
So yesterday, what we understand is that he refused to make any statements to the investigators after his detention and after being brought into the investigative office for questioning. And that seems to be a part of his larger strategy, if I can call it that. Which doesn't, for the moment, seem to involve really trying to win either in the beginning of this criminal investigation for insurrection and abuse of power, but perhaps also in the Constitutional Court, we'll see, through the prospect of winning on the merits of his case. Rather, he seems to be trying to win this battle through political means, through shaping public opinion, through trying to get the conservative base on his side, and at the same time, essentially trying to delegitimize the investigation as well as the impeachment. So he's trying to really win the battle through the court of public opinion rather than, I think, through legal means. And that's probably because, at least so far as we know, the evidence that's against him is overwhelming. I also think he really disdains the investigation into him as well as the joint investigative body that's carrying it out. And he doesn't want to do anything that would seem to legitimize that, partially because, for all we know, he really does have the conviction that this joint investigative body is illegitimate. And in that sense, I think that there's an element of sort of self-convincing, or if you want to be uncharitable about it, an element perhaps of delusion in his strategy.
All right. Well, his lawyer says that the president will not undergo any further questioning because he's unwell, and already fully explained his position yesterday. So there are lots of twists and turns in this process, as you've noted. Remind us, who ultimately calls the shots on how this corruption investigation will pan out?
Well, for the moment, the joint investigative body has put together the CIO, a corruption investigative body that also looks at abuses of power, as well as the police at various points, the Ministry of National Defense and the prosecutors. The joint investigative body will carry out at the CIO office the interrogation and questioning, as well as the other compilation of evidence and many of the elements that would go into a charging document. But the CIO itself doesn't have that right to initiate the charge. That rather has to be turned over to the prosecutor. So this joint investigative body will begin with the CIO questioning and evidence gathering in association with the other parts of the investigative body, but ultimately it's going to be the prosecutors who would decide whether or not that case gets carried forward. In some sense, Yoon has been acting in bad faith throughout the entirety of this, and he doesn't seem to be cooperating at this stage in the investigation. And to come back to your health question, I think that this is probably a false pretext for him to continue to try to drag out this process and delegitimize it.
Kicking the can down the road tactic, perhaps we can call it. I don't know. How do you see this hearing, the ongoing investigation, impacting President Yoon politically? Because recent polls have suggested a rebound in public support for his ruling People Power Party.
Yeah, so politically, he's dead. It's very difficult to imagine a scenario in which he could rebound. His party, of course, has come back within the margin of error vis-a-vis the opposition. But Yoon himself, still, more than 65% of the population thinks that he should be removed from office. Part of the reason for the rebound for his party is because many conservatives, not only those who support Yoon, but also the broader conservatives who disagree with his martial law decree and even agree with the impeachment, absolutely detest, in some respects for good reason, the head of the Democratic Party. He would be likely to win the next special presidential election if Yoon were removed from power by the Constitutional Court. That person, Lee Jae-myung, is himself convicted of felony election fraud. And part of the strategy from the PPP, from the conservatives, seems to be indeed to try to kick the can down the road, to delay the procedure so that Lee Jae-myung might have his conviction formally certified in the court of final instance, which would bar him from running in the special presidential election. So a lot of conservatives are trying to strategize this in such a way that Lee Jae-myung won't be able to run for president in the special election. Yoon himself, I think, however, is politically dead. I think he committed political suicide on December 3rd.
Well, he turned himself in for questioning to prevent what he called the risk of unsavory bloodshed. Yet a man set himself on fire on January 15th near the CIO. We still don't know what led to that, but talk us through the risks that Yoon's tactics may be having on the safety of his supporters and the opposers.
Well, first of all, I think it's laughable to say that Yoon voluntarily turned himself in. He was holed up in his residence behind a Praetorian guard of the Presidential Security Service for days and days after an initial lawful warrant for his detention was refused. And indeed, that did run the risk of security services clashing with each other. His presidential security service could have potentially clashed with the law enforcement mechanism of the Joint Investigative Body. The acting president, Chae Sang-mok, made it very clear that he didn't want that to take place. And although he didn't show substantial courage in telling the Presidential Security Service to stand down, he did essentially tell both sides, Yoon's security as well as the Joint Investigative Body, to make sure that there was no bloodshed and no violence among law enforcement agents. And ultimately, that is what was the case. And we don't really know why it is that the Presidential Security Service stood down. It might be that acting President Chae brokered a deal. It might be because the Presidential Security Service fractured internally. It might be because eventually Yoon told them to stand down. We're not exactly sure what happened. As for President Yoon's broader supporters, they're fine. It's very cold here and they're protesting outside, but the police here, have of course treated them, as well as the Democratic Party opposition protesters in the street, with kid gloves. And so they're fine. And if anything, now they're better off that they don't have to go out in the street in the freezing cold anymore in the night and support either one side or the other.
Interesting perspective there. Thank you so much, Dr. Mason Richey, who's Associate Professor of International Politics from the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to speak with you.